When I first moved to Tokyo, I thought I was prepared for everything. The bustling crowds, the sleepless trains, the neon lights bleeding into the sky like liquid fire. I wasn't. Tokyo has a rhythm that either swallows you or seduces you. For me, it was both. I came here to teach English at a junior high in Setagaya, a quiet ward far from the chaos of Shibuya. The students were respectful, curious, and charming in their teenage awkwardness. But it was the stories they whispered that lingered in my mind long after the bell rang. One day, as I erased the board, one of the girls, Kana, lingered at the door. Her voice was barely above a breath when she spoke. "Sensei, don't walk home alone. Not after dark." I smiled, assuming it was just a sweet, overly cautious warning. "Why's that?" She hesitated. "There's a woman. If she asks you something, don't answer. Don't lie either." Before I could ask more, she bolted. It stuck with me, though, not just her words, but the way her eyes looked when she said them. Wide. Afraid. That night, I stayed late grading papers. By the time I packed up, the school was quiet. Too quiet. Outside, fog had swallowed the streets, and my usual route home looked like something out of a dream I hadn't wanted to remember. Still, I wasn't in the mood for a long walk. I cut through the alleys instead. Tokyo alleys are strange things. Narrow, winding, often silent. The kind of silence that makes you feel like something is listening. My footsteps echoed off the walls, steady at first, then quicker, like they were trying to outrun my own heartbeat. I kept glancing behind me, unsure why I was so on edge. I told myself it was just the fog. Then I saw her. She stepped out from the mist like she'd been carved from it. Tall, slender, dressed in a long red coat that brushed the tops of her black boots. Her hair was midnight black, flowing and glossy, too perfect. And she wore a surgical mask over her mouth. Not unusual in Tokyo. People wore them all the time, for colds, allergies, politeness. But this was different. She blocked my path and tilted her head slowly, almost childlike. "Watashi kire?" she asked. Her voice was soft, lilting, like the wind rustling through paper screens. "Am I pretty?" I froze. Every cell in my body told me to run, but my feet stayed planted. I was trying to rationalize it. Maybe she was just a lonely woman. Maybe this was performance art. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I forced a smile. "Hi," I said, my voice thin. "Yes, you are." She didn't move for a moment. Then her pale fingers lifted to the mask, and slowly, ever so slowly, she began to pull it down. That's when my heart dropped. Because in that moment, I knew. This wasn't performance art. This wasn't loneliness. This was the moment I had stepped into a story I wasn't supposed to believe. I should have turned and run the second her fingers reached for the mask. But I didn't. I just stood there, heart pounding so loud it echoed in my ears like a drumbeat of regret. My breath hitched in my throat as I watched her pale hand tug the mask down inch by inch. At first, all I saw were her lips. Red. Too red. Then the corners of her mouth kept going. And going. Until the impossible grin stretched from ear to ear. A jagged, open wound grinning at me like a cracked porcelain doll. Her cheeks had been slit wide, grotesquely held together by something I couldn't name. Scar tissue, maybe. Or hatred. She tilted her head again. The same soft voice came, but now it was twisted, as if her words were being pushed through broken glass. "Do you still think I'm pretty?" I couldn't speak. My mouth had gone dry, my throat locked up. Everything in my body screamed at me to bolt. But my feet were rooted to the pavement like I was part of the street itself. Yes, I stammered. Her eyes narrowed. A smile played across that monstrous face. Bigger, crueler, more knowing. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a pair of scissors. Long, old-fashioned, gleaming even in the dim streetlight. I gasped and stumbled back, my heel catching the edge of the curb. She stepped forward. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was about to scream, when, out of nowhere, a blur rushed between us. A bicycle shot past, the rider shouting an apology as they disappeared down the street. It was just enough. Just enough for her to flinch. Just enough for me to move. I turned and ran. I didn't think, I just ran. Past vending machines, rusting gates, cracked pavement. I could hear my own ragged breaths, the blood rushing in my ears. I didn't look back, not even once. I didn't need to. I could feel her behind me, like the cold shadow of a nightmare I couldn't shake. I don't remember getting to my apartment. Just that I slammed the door behind me and collapsed to the floor, heart trying to break free from my chest. I didn't sleep. I barely blinked. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of the wind outside, I was sure it was her. Waiting. The next day at school, I looked like hell. The students stared but didn't ask. Only Kana approached me during lunch break. "She asked you, didn't she?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. Kana looked down at her hands. "They say, if you lie, she'll follow you." I wanted to believe it was just an urban legend, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But that night, around 2 a.m., I heard something that made my blood freeze. Tap, tap, tap. My apartment is on the 3rd floor. There's no balcony, no tree outside my window, just cold, open air. And yet, the tapping continued. Software rhythmic, patient. I crawled toward the window, heart hammering in my throat. I reached up and pulled the curtain aside. There was nothing there. But drawn in the condensation of the glass were 2 words. Kirei-ne. Are you pretty? I stopped sleeping. Not entirely, of course. My body would eventually betray me for a few hours at a time. But even then, it wasn't rest. I'd wake up gasping in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the whisper echoing in my ears. Watashi kirei? I'd throw on the lights, check every door and window, inspect the lock on the balcony that no one could reach. Still, every morning I'd find something out of place. A red smudge on the doorknob, a folded tissue on the floor that I didn't remember using. One night, I swear I smelled perfume, sweet, old-fashioned, like flowers wilted in a grave. I tried to bury myself in work, but even the classroom felt different now. The kids were quieter, eyes darting, like they were waiting for something, or maybe watching for it. When I asked a boy named Hiro if everything was okay, he didn't answer at first. Then he looked up at me, face pale, and said, "She doesn't like liars." I wanted to pretend I didn't understand. I wanted to tell myself it was just their imagination, maybe something viral online. But deep down, I knew. The fear in Hiro's voice matched the feeling in my chest. He'd seen her. Somehow, he knew. That day, I took a different route home. Avoided alleys, stuck to crowded areas. But it didn't help. On the train platform, I saw her. She stood among the crowd, still as a statue, head slightly tilted. Red coat, mask, black hair, not moving, not blinking. I looked again. Gone. I turned in circles, trying to spot her, but there were too many people, too much noise. I rushed onto the train, gripping the pole with trembling hands, eyes darting to every surgical mask in sight. That night, I found a message scrawled on my apartment door. It wasn't ink. It wasn't paint. It was lipstick. Red. Thick. Glossy. Watashi kirei? The next morning, I called in sick. I told the school I had a fever. In truth, I just couldn't face it. The students, the whispers, the mirrors. I spent the day trying to piece together what was happening, if there was a way to stop it, to protect myself. I searched forums, old articles, urban legend blogs, and then I found it. A newspaper clipping from 1979. Multiple deaths in a rural school district. All students. All with mouths sliced open from ear to ear. The police had ruled them as animal attacks or tragic accidents. But buried in the comments of an archived thread was one line that chilled my blood. She asked me if she was pretty. I said yes. She let me go. But only for a while. It was signed TK and dated only 3 years ago. I stared at the screen, heart thudding. Was this real? How many people had seen her and never lived to tell? Or worse, how many thought they'd escaped, only to be taken later? Just then my phone rang. No caller ID. I picked it up, hands trembling. Hello? Silence. Then, soft breathing. Shaky. Wet. And then it came. That voice. Watashi. Kirei? I dropped the phone. My legs gave out and I collapsed against the wall. The phone buzzed once more and went dark. I couldn't move for what felt like an hour. My mind was spinning. Was I being haunted? Hunted? Was she a ghost? A cursed woman? A legend? Or was I just going mad? I finally worked up the courage to go to the door to make sure it was locked. And there, just beneath the peephole, was something new. Another red smear. But this time, shaped like a mouth. Slit open wide. I hadn't told anyone. Not really. Not the truth. Not about the woman in red. Not about the lipstick messages. Not even about the phone call. I couldn't. How could I explain something that didn't belong in the world of logic and reality? But the weight of it was growing heavier by the day, pressing on my chest, twisting my dreams into something foul and wet and sharp. I started seeing her in places she shouldn't be. At the ramen shop, her reflection appeared in the glass beside mine, just for a second. On the train, a woman in red stood on the opposite platform. She didn't move. The train pulled away before I could blink. At school, I stopped using the restroom mirrors. It felt safer not to look at my own face, because sometimes something else looked back. That's when I remembered a name, a woman who used to work at our school years ago. The students whispered about her the way they whispered about ghosts. Miss Sato. Retired early. Nervous breakdown, they said. The details were vague, hidden behind administrative language and polite shrugs. But I found her. She lived alone, in a cramped apartment not far from the edge of the ward, buried behind a tangle of convenience stores and shuttered bathhouses. She agreed to meet only if I didn't mention it over the phone. When I arrived, she was waiting by the door, pale and shivering, eyes darting behind me before letting me in. "You saw her, didn't you?" she whispered before I could even speak. I nodded. She shut the door with trembling hands and led me inside. Her place smelled of old tatami mats and incense. Mirrors were covered, every single one, with towels, with newspapers, with tape. "I saw her in 1981, she said. Same red coat, same mask. She asked me if she was pretty." "What did you say?" I asked. I said yes, like everyone else, and I ran. My stomach turned. "And she followed?" "She always follows," Miss Sato said. "She doesn't stop until you pass her on to someone else, or until she takes what she wants." She poured me tea with shaking hands, told me she eventually left her job, gave up mirrors, gave up walking at night. I thought I escaped, but sometimes I still hear the scissors. When I returned home that evening, something felt off. The lights were dimmer than I remembered. The hallway smelled like iron. I checked every room, every corner, every window. Then I saw it, on the wall near the kitchen, carved into the plaster. 7 vertical lines, scratched deep, like tally marks. I hadn't made them. I had no idea how long they'd been there. I ran my fingers over them, heart thudding like a warning drum. That night, I didn't sleep at all. When I closed my eyes, she was there, standing in the corner of my room, in the reflection of my TV screen, behind the curtain. In my dreams, I saw her without the mask, over and over again. And when I woke up in the gray morning light, I found something beneath my bed. A pair of scissors. Not mine. Rusty. Stained. The handle was warm. It was no longer just fear. It had become obsession. After finding the scissors beneath my bed, something inside me shifted. The line between reality and nightmare had blurred beyond recognition. I wasn't just being haunted, I was being hunted. And I knew now that if I didn't do something, didn't find the root of this curse, it would consume me like it had so many others before. Miss Sato had mentioned whispers, old names, faces forgotten, so I dug deeper. At the back of an old online folklore archive, buried beneath academic essays and grainy scanned pages, I found a reference to a woman from the 1970s, a patient at a now-abandoned cosmetic surgery clinic outside of Tokyo. The name wasn't given, but the description matched her. A disfigured face, an obsession with beauty, a tragic accident, they said, or perhaps a betrayal. One line was underlined in red ink, nearly faded. She was last seen in the mirror hall before the fire. I had to go. The hospital was a crumbling ruin north of the city, buried in overgrowth and fog, as if even the land had tried to forget it. The train took me close, but I had to walk the last stretch. My steps echoed in the silence of that place, so hollow, so thick with the weight of lost things. Crows circled above like they were waiting for the ending. The gate was rusted shut. I climbed it. Inside, the smell of mold and dust hit me like a wave. The walls were stained with water damage and strange brown smears. Broken gurneys lined the corridors. And then, scattered like breadcrumbs, I saw them. Tiny things she had left behind. Scraps of red cloth, lipstick tubes, surgical masks. One mask was nailed to a door with rusted scissors. I pushed forward, heart thudding, breathing through my sleeve. Every room felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by a story too angry to die. In what looked like an old patient record room, I found the file. No name, just a date, 1978. Attached was a photograph, mutilated. Someone had scratched out the eyes and mouth. Below, scrawled in black marker, were the words, "Am I pretty now?" I should have left then. I should have burned the place down. But something deeper pulled me further, past broken beds and shattered mirrors, to the main corridor, the one leading to the operating theater. At the end of the hall stood a door, half open, sagging on its hinges. Inside, the walls were lined with cracked mirrors, fragments that caught my reflection in pieces. I stepped inside. There, scratched into one of the larger shards, were 3 words. "How about now?" Suddenly, the air shifted, cold, rotten, and then I heard it. A child's voice, barely above a whisper right behind me. "She's behind you." Every hair on my body stood up. I turned slowly, limbs trembling, afraid the mirrors would show me something I wasn't ready to see. And there it was. Just past the doorway, half hidden in shadow, a red coat swayed. Not from wind, not from breath, but like it was being worn. By someone standing perfectly still, watching. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. That red coat swaying in the hallway was more than just fabric. It was a warning, a declaration. She had followed me here, and I was alone. I backed into the mirror-lined room, heart beating like a siren in my chest. The reflections warped my image into a dozen twisted versions of myself, fear-stricken, pale, hollow-eyed. In each shard, I thought I saw her creeping closer. But when I turned, she wasn't there. Only the echo of her presence filled the air, cold, charged, waiting. And then, footsteps, software, deliberate. I turned slowly. She was standing just beyond the doorway now. The surgical mask was gone. Her face was a horror stitched by rage and memory. Mouth torn wide, lips dripping red like she'd just finished feeding. Her eyes were bottomless. "Watashi kare." Her voice wasn't a question anymore. It was a curse. I wanted to scream, to run. But something in me snapped. I remembered Miss Sato's words. Something about confusing her. Something about a ritual. It wasn't written down, not fully, but scattered across forums and whispers. Answer with a question. Distract her. Give her candy. Never show fear. I reached into my pocket with shaking hands and pulled out a wrapped piece of strawberry hard candy. I didn't even remember putting it there. It must have been from a student weeks ago. I held it out. She tilted her head, puzzled, hesitating. "You like sweet things, don't you?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Her mouth twitched. She stepped forward. I tossed the candy at her feet. She stared down at it, that horrifying smile trembling. I took a breath and blurted out the only thing I could think of. "Do you think you're pretty?" She froze. The air seemed to ripple. The lights above flickered, casting dancing shadows across the mirrors. For a moment, her eyes filled with something strange. Not anger, not hunger, but confusion. And then came the scream. It didn't come from her mouth. It came from everywhere. The mirrors vibrated. My ears rang. I stumbled back, covering my face as the lights exploded one by one. The sound was like 100 voices screaming in agony, all trapped in glass. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. Only silence remained. I ran. Through the collapsing hallway, through peeling corridors, out into the choking night, where the trees seemed to bend away from me. I didn't stop until I reached the train station, until the city lights blinded me back into the real world. But something followed me home. That night, I sat in the corner of my bedroom, every light on, a pair of scissors clutched in one hand. And I waited. Nothing came. Maybe the ritual worked. But the next morning at school, Kana didn't show up. Then Hiro. Then 2 more students. By lunch, the staff was buzzing about the police being called, and by evening, the news broke. A student had been found in a park near the river, face mutilated, mouth slashed from ear to ear, just like the others, just like her. I felt cold crawl up my spine. Maybe the ritual didn't save me. Maybe it only bought time. Or maybe I passed her on. I stopped going to school. The news of the student's death spread like smoke, thick and suffocating. My phone buzzed constantly, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. All I saw when I closed my eyes was his face. Not as it had been, but how it was found. Slashed open, mouth torn in a grotesque mimicry of her smile. I knew it was my fault. I'd thought I escaped her. I was wrong. The ritual hadn't ended it. It only moved the curse. It only bought time. Just enough for someone else to suffer. Maybe that was her game all along. Maybe there was never a way to win. Only to delay. Only to pass her on. But I couldn't live with that. So I dug deeper. Old temples, shrine scrolls, urban legends scribbled in half-dead threads on forums that hadn't seen activity in years. And finally, buried within the tale of the Onano yokai, I found something. One line. A theory. If her pain began in the mirror, then only a mirror can hold her. A confrontation, they wrote. A direct gaze. But not yours. Your reflections. If the fear lives in your soul, you must face it there. If she's asking for truth, you must give it. No flattery. No lies. No escape. There was one place left. An old festival temple just outside Kamakura. It housed a mirror chamber, once used for meditation and spiritual alignment. Now, it stood nearly forgotten. Tourists passed it by. But it was still there. I waited until dusk. The wind howled through the forest as I climbed the stone steps. My fingers trembled as I opened the old wooden doors. Dust danced in the dying light, and the scent of incense long since burned clung to the air. The mirror hall welcomed me like a tomb. 7 tall mirrors lined the walls. I stepped into the center and sat cross-legged, heart pounding, eyes locked on my reflection. I waited, and waited, until I heard it. That voice. That whisper. Watashi Kirei? She stepped from the shadows behind me. No footsteps, just a presence, cold and unnatural. Her red coat dragged along the floor. Her scissors glinted in the moonlight, spilling through the cracks in the ceiling. She was in every mirror now. Dozens of her, surrounding me. She didn't move closer. Not yet. She just stared, waiting. And I knew what I had to do. I stood slowly, turning to face her. Not directly, but through the mirror. "No," I said quietly. "You're not pretty." She twitched. I didn't stop. "But you were. Once. Someone hurt you. Someone shattered your beauty and your heart. And now you wear your pain like a mask." The scissors in her hand trembled. "You want others to feel what you felt," I whispered. You want them to bleed like you did." She stepped forward, through the mirror. The air cracked like lightning as she crossed the boundary between reflection and flesh. I saw it all. Her face was no longer rage. It was grief, twisted, boundless, eternal. And then, she lunged. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I closed my eyes, and everything went black. I woke in a hospital bed. My mouth was bandaged. My body was weak. Nurses came and went, speaking softly. No one mentioned a red coat. No one asked about mirrors. They told me I had collapsed on the steps of the school, that I had been out for days. But I know what I saw. I know what I did. Some say I fainted, that it was a nervous breakdown, a hallucination brought on by stress. But I remember her hand, cold, software, reaching toward mine in the dark. I think she let me live. Because for once, someone told her the truth. But sometimes, when I catch my reflection in a window or a screen left on in the dark, I swear, I see a second face behind mine, smiling, waiting.